Beyond the shattered tower, beyond the planet's orbit, space rippled with movement that wasn't natural. Thousands, no, tens of thousands, of hive warships shifted as though waking from shared dream, their molten veins blazing like rivers of fire carved into the void. They moved with precision, with hunger, like a storm no wall could withstand. And every single one pulsed in rhythm with Lyra's new heartbeat. She staggered among the ruins of the chamber, silver fire still glowing faintly along her veins. Her skin felt stretched too thin, her body an imperfect vessel for the alien code now written into her bones. The shard's voice had fallen silent after the merging, but the silence was worse than its demand. It felt like something was waiting, coiled inside her chest, not asleep, not awake, just patient. Darren pulled himself up from rubble, his armor broken, his gauntlet barely sparking. He stared at her with a mixture of awe and terror. Blood dried across his cheek. "Lyra, what are you?" Her lips parted, but no answer came. Her voice wasn't her own anymore. Not fully. She could feel it inside, that alien resonance humming beneath every syllable she tried to shape. When she finally spoke, it came out as both her and not her. "I am incomplete." The rebels who survived, maybe 20 out of hundreds, stood scattered around the chamber's edges. None dared approach. They whispered to each other, voices shaking. "She's not human anymore. She's one of them. Or worse." Lyra heard them all, each syllable carried through the tower's metal bones, as if the structure itself wanted her to know every thought, every fear. And the shard within her twisted the words into fuel, a fire urging her to let go of doubt, to embrace what she had become. Darren didn't waver. He stumbled forward, clutching his side, forcing his battered body to move until he stood within arm's reach of her glow. "Listen to me. You're still Lyra. I don't care what's inside you. I don't care what it's turned you into. You're ours. You're mine." His voice cracked raw. "Don't you dare forget that." Something inside her shuddered, aching at his words, at the memory of warmth, of laughter, of blood and grief shared in the Resistance's dark tunnels. But just as quickly, another voice pressed harder, colder. Not the shard, not the creature she merged with, but something vaster. They're calling. Her vision split. On one side, she saw the chamber, the rebels, Darren. On the other, she saw the fleet above, every warship screaming with alien clarity, waiting for her command. She could feel their weapons, their engines, their hunger. With a thought, she could bend them, guide them, unleash them. She could end the rebellion and the war in a single breath. Her knees buckled. Darren caught her shoulders, shaking her. "Stay with me." But she was already somewhere else. In a flash of searing light, her mind was dragged outward, flung into the void like a signal carried on solar wind. She gasped as her perspective shifted, her body gone, her vision stretched across the fleet. She was inside them all. Each warship was a limb, each soldier a cell, the hive not alien anymore, but an extension of her. She could command them, and they would obey without question. The power was intoxicating, terrifying, beautiful. And then she heard them, voices countless and layered, speaking in unison. The hive wasn't silent anymore. "You're the bridge. You're the axis. You are the one who will end the fracture." Lyra's scream tore from her body back in the chamber, her glow surging bright enough to sear rebel eyes. Darren shielded his face, teeth gritted, refusing to let go of her even as she convulsed in his arms. Above the planet, the fleet shifted course. Entire formations turned as one, their molten engines igniting. They weren't descending to attack the humans. They weren't retreating. They were kneeling, tens of thousands of ships pivoting their bows downward toward the planet, toward her, as if acknowledging their new master. The surviving rebels dropped their weapons, staring in horror. One whispered the words that would spread like wildfire through the Resistance in days to come. "She commands them." But Lyra wasn't smiling. She wasn't triumphant. She was terrified because she didn't know if she was commanding the hive or if the hive was commanding her. And deep inside the chorus of alien voices, buried in the tidal wave of their worship, was a shadow. A presence so vast it made the fleet look like insects. A mind older than any world she had known. It wasn't the shard. It wasn't the creature she merged with. It was something else, and it had just noticed her. The word spread faster than fire in oxygen-rich tunnels. She commands them. By the time the surviving rebels dragged themselves out of the broken chamber, the news had already been transmitted through half the resistance networks orbiting the planet. Encoded fragments of Darren's frantic comms had slipped through before the tower interfered, reaching ships and stations who now whispered the impossible. Some refused to believe. Others clung to it as a sign. And many, far too many, saw it for what it was, a nightmare. Lyra staggered through corridors that bent and pulsed around her like veins in a living creature. The tower no longer resisted her presence. It shaped itself around her, doors opening before she touched them, lights flickering with her pulse. She hated it. She hated the way her feet felt lighter here, the way the air seemed tuned to her lungs, as though the structure itself anticipated every need. It wasn't a prison anymore. It was a host. Darren stayed close, his body broken, but his grip unrelenting. His eyes never left her, not even when the others kept their distance. Carr spat openly when she passed, the sound sharp in the living metal corridor. "You're not one of us anymore," he growled. "You brought them here." His words burned, not because they were wrong, but because part of her knew he was right. Lyra wanted to scream at him, to shove the truth into his skull, that she hadn't asked for this, that she was fighting every second not to lose herself. But the hive's voices hissed whenever her anger spiked. "Do not explain. Do not beg. Command." She bit down hard until blood filled her mouth. She wasn't going to give them that. The group reached a cavernous hangar bay. What should have been an empty chamber, cracked open to the void, was instead filled with shifting light. Alien drones assembling, molten circuitry weaving itself into new machines. The rebels froze at the sight of hundreds of constructs rising, their frames half-formed but already bristling with weapons. Jessa whispered, voice trembling, "Gods, she's building an army." "I'm not," Lyra snapped. Her voice echoed wrong, resonant, making the drones pause mid-assembly. "They are." She didn't gesture, didn't command, but still the drones turned their eyeless heads toward her, awaiting instruction. The silence was suffocating. Darren stepped forward, interposing himself between her and the others. "Listen to me," he said, his tone firm but low. "This power, it doesn't make her the enemy. We saw what she did back there. She saved us when the tower should have killed us all." He looked at Lyra, and she could see it in his eyes. Even he wasn't sure he believed his own words. But he believed in her. The rebels muttered among themselves. Some lowered their rifles. Others didn't. Carr shook his head. "I'll never follow a half-breed puppet. She's not Lyra anymore. She's a weapon waiting to be aimed at us." Lyra's hands trembled, not with fear, but with something far worse. She could feel his defiance like static on her skin, her shard urging her to crush it, to silence him. It would be so easy. Just one thought, and the drones would tear him apart before he finished his next insult. Instead, she closed her eyes. "If you don't trust me, leave. I won't stop you." The words surprised even her. They weren't the shards. They weren't the hives. They were hers. Carr sneered but said nothing more. He turned sharply, leading a handful of rebels back into the tunnels. Lyra's chest ached as she watched them go, knowing she might never see them alive again. Jessa stayed, eyes fixed on her, torn between fear and awe. "If the hive bows to you, maybe we can use it. Maybe we can turn their weapons against them." Lyra's stomach knotted. The thought had crossed her mind, more than once. But every time she tried to reach for the hive, she felt its vastness waiting. Millions of voices, a mind bigger than worlds. And beneath it, the shadow she had glimpsed earlier, the thing that had noticed her. She could fight the hive, perhaps even bend it, but that deeper presence, she wasn't sure it could be fought at all. Before she could answer, alarms rippled through the chamber. Low, alien pulses resonating in the walls. The drones stiffened, their frames glowing. Lyra's vision blurred, split again, half in her body, half across the void. She saw what they saw. The fleet wasn't just kneeling anymore. It was moving, Warships peeled away from their formation, engines blazing, diving into hyperspace corridors. They weren't here to bombard the planet. They were scattering like predators released from their leash, sweeping into human space, converging on resistance strongholds. The hive was expanding, and fast. Her mind reeled as the chorus of voices surged. Guide us. Let us. Show us where to strike. Her stomach turned. She hadn't given the order, but they acted as if she had. Darren grabbed her shoulders again, shaking her as her eyes glazed with alien fire. What's happening? What are they doing? Her voice cracked when she answered, because for the first time, she realized the terrible truth. They think. I told them to attack. The chamber shook as the tower's spire lit up like a beacon, silver and gold veins blazing across its surface, broadcasting her presence across the stars. Somewhere far away, human colonies screamed under fire they weren't ready for, and Lyra stood at the center of it, horrified, as the hive slaughtered in her name. Lyra felt her bones hum with the same alien resonance that rippled through the crystalline towers dotting the ruined field. Every breath came as if filtered through a lattice of light, her lungs not quite her own anymore. The shard sibling had not simply merged with her. It had braided itself into the very rhythm of her cells, rewriting what it meant to be human. And yet, her mind, stubborn, fractured, iron-willed, still pulsed with one thought. Humanity survives, no matter what. She stood at the window of the broken citadel, staring out at the thickening swarm clouds above the fractured world. Their movements were wrong now, synchronized to something deeper, something responding not to strategy, but to her heartbeat. She could see them shifting, folding, drawing patterns in the sky that mirrored her pulse. She clenched her fists. The moment she stilled her heart, the swarm froze mid-motion. The moment she let it hammer, the hive's rhythm thundered to match. She laughed once, the sound sharp and horrified. She had become their conductor. A soft voice, not hers, slid through the edges of her awareness. They were always waiting for you. You think you climbed into us. But you don't realize, Lyra. We climbed into you long ago. Her body shivered, and she gripped the shard embedded in her chest like it was a blade, even though it was now part of her. No, she whispered. I control this. Me. But doubt crept like static, an itch at the base of her skull. Outside, ships carrying what few human survivors remained darted between debris fields. Desperate captains shouted fractured comms across crackling channels. But Lyra could hear all of them as if they were voices in her head. She knew who was alive, who was lying, who was about to die. Their pulses rang to her like notes in a melody. That terrified her most of all. She had never wanted power. She had wanted control, yes, discipline, order, structure to keep humanity standing. But this wasn't control. This was possession wearing her face. When she forced her breathing into a slower rhythm, the swarm drifted down toward the surface, curling like smoke around the shattered city. And then the first flash of rebellion struck. A lone human strike craft darted from hiding and fired a rail round directly into the hive cluster above the towers. It ripped through 3 of the massive creatures, shattering their wings, sending them crashing to the ash plains. The swarm convulsed, and Lyra felt it in her gut like someone had punched her stomach. She doubled over, gagging, as if those creatures' pain were her own. But even as she screamed, she could feel the alien presence inside her surge, wrapping her pain into something else, rage. And then, before she could even think, the swarm turned. Millions of wings thundered. The skies went black. On the comms, human voices broke into panic. They're moving, God, they're moving. Who's directing this? Lyra could hear their terror. But worse, she could feel their anger turning against her. Someone whispered her name through the comm channels. She's not one of us anymore. Her vision blurred red as the shard pulsed like a second heart. A rush of alien emotions surged through her. Not hunger, not bloodlust, but something like yearning, as though the hive itself were desperate to embrace her fully. She clenched her teeth so hard her jaw cracked, forcing herself to anchor her to one thought. I am still Lyra. But then the alien voice returned, whispering in the hollow of her ribs. Are you? Or are you the first of us to remember she was human? The strike craft that had fired the rail round reloaded. Lyra could see its captain's face in her mind, a woman she once trained with, someone who had lost her children in the war's first days. That grief burned like acid in Lyra's veins, because she could feel it as her own. And suddenly, the swarm shifted course again, not toward the human fleets, but toward that single craft, like the hive had sniffed out the pilot's pain and decided to smother it. Lyra screamed, "No!" But her voice carried not through her throat, but through the swarm itself. For the first time, the hive recoiled from her command. They froze mid-dive. The silence in the sky was deafening. The shard sibling in her chest beat faster, almost frantic. You've given them a contradiction. You've made them hesitate. But hesitation is poison, Lyra. They cannot survive it. Neither can you. And yet, for one terrible, wonderful second, she realized she could give them hesitation. She could make the hive do nothing. She could paralyze them with her will. For the first time since the shard fused to her, she felt the barest flicker of something close to control. Not mastery, not ownership, but resistance. She straightened, wiping blood from her mouth, and whispered, "You listen to me now." And the swarm held still, millions of wings shivering in midair like a frozen storm waiting to break. But out in the distance, across the black sky, another presence stirred. Vaster, older, colder. A second hive had awakened, one that had not been waiting for Lyra, but for the chance to devour her. The second hive's arrival was not like the first. Where the swarm Lyra had bent into hesitation felt like a storm of living wings. The newcomer came as a gravity well of silence. The stars bent. Light shivered. A monstrous shadow carved across the void, eclipsing moons with its sheer mass. The creatures were larger, older, their exoskeletons jagged with scars from wars fought long before humanity had learned to burn coal. Their collective voice didn't whisper in Lyra's chest. It thundered through the marrow of her bones. "You're not theirs. You're not yours. You are seed. You are soil. You are ours." She staggered back from the citadel's shattered window as her swarm, the one that had frozen mid-air under her will, began to twitch, their hesitation collapsing. One by one, they shivered and turned their wings toward the dark horizon, like slaves recognizing a master. Lyra's stomach dropped. The hive she thought she'd influenced had never been hers. They'd only been borrowing her breath. Now, they remembered who called them. Her knees buckled, and she hit the stone floor hard, coughing blood. The shard inside her flared painfully, and she saw visions not with her eyes, but behind them. A battlefield of extinct worlds, cities reduced to bone and shadow, whole species erased in silence as this elder hive fed. "This is what comes," the shard whispered in panic. "They will consume you. And me. They always consume." It was the first time the alien sibling had sounded afraid. That fear kindled a spark in her chest. She clenched her fists against the stone until her knuckles cracked. "No," she hissed, dragging herself upright. "I don't care if you've done this to 1,000 worlds. You don't own me. You don't own them." She pointed toward the swarm outside, her voice breaking but loud, raw, human. "Not anymore." But even as she spoke, the second hive extended its will across the sky, and her swarm folded in mid-air like paper before a fire. Millions of wings bowed toward the void, toward that ancient, monstrous presence. Lyra screamed as though something were being ripped out of her lungs, because she felt the tether that connected her heartbeat to the swarm tearing, thread by thread. For a moment she thought she would die right there, split in two by alien hunger. But then, like a reflex born of rage and terror, she slammed her palm against the shard buried in her chest. It burned white-hot. The citadel shook. A pulse of energy tore through the air, a wave that flung her swarm backward, scattering them like shattered glass. And for an instant, the second hive recoiled. But that recoil was not retreat. It was recognition. "Ah," the voice growled through the cosmos. "Your weapon, sharpened without knowing. Broken, and yet blade." The stars around it flickered and died, snuffed like candles. Lyra's vision blurred until she wasn't sure if she was still in her body or floating in the void itself. The Elder Hive wasn't just an enemy. It was inevitability. It wasn't here to conquer. It was here to finish. On the human comms, she could hear the survivors screaming, begging, praying. Their ships spun like toys against the pull of the Elder Hive's gravity. One ship cracked apart, its crew sucked into the void, their last breaths filling Lyra's veins like poison. She fell to her knees again, trembling because she could feel every death. It was killing her, breaking her mind into shards of grief. She wanted to close her eyes, let it end, let the hive finish her. But then, cutting through the chaos, came a voice she hadn't expected, her father's. Not alive. No, he had died years ago, but memory strong, sharp, a flashback seared into her skull. Lyra, control isn't about domination. It's about choice. Even if everything is falling apart, even if you can't win, you choose what you'll stand for. The words slammed into her like an anchor. She inhaled, choked, forced herself to her feet. Blood streamed from her nose, but her spine straightened. Then I choose, she said aloud, staring up at the shadow blotting out the stars. I choose humanity, and I'll make you choke on it. The shard in her chest erupted again, light lancing from her ribs into the sky. The swarm froze midair. For a split second, they didn't bow to the Elder Hive. They didn't bow to her, either. They simply held, waiting, balanced between two masters. The silence was unbearable. And then, like a single note struck across a cosmic instrument, one of the Elder Hive's titans let out a shriek that cracked mountains. The battle was no longer waiting. It had begun. The shriek of the Elder Titan rippled across every atom of the citadel, rattling stones loose and splintering the spires above her. Lyra staggered, her vision doubling, her lungs burning with air that wasn't air anymore. It was charged, crawling with sparks, thick with the taste of ozone and blood. The swarm outside, millions of bodies, hung frozen between obedience and rebellion. Every second of that tension stretched her raw, like skin pulled too thin across a blade. The shard inside her wasn't quiet either. It howled, flaring in jagged pulses that made her veins glow with light. She could feel her bones vibrating, fracturing, repairing in the same heartbeat. Darren's voice crackled faint on her comm. Lyra, don't. But then his signal was drowned in static. The Elder Hive was jamming everything. She was alone. Her knees gave out, but before she hit the floor, something caught her, threads of luminous energy spilling from the shard, holding her upright like invisible hands. She gasped as her body arched backward, chest thrust forward, the shard pushing itself deeper into her sternum. Every nerve screamed, every thought fractured, and yet, through the agony, she felt connection, not just to the swarm outside, but to the stone walls, to the dead ships orbiting above, to the fractured metal of human guns left on the floor. The shard wasn't just fusing with her. It was dragging her into the network. Stop fighting me, the shard's voice hissed, though it wasn't truly a voice. It was pressure, like hot water behind her eyes. You resist, you bleed. You merge, you wield. She clawed at her chest, nails raking skin, but the light only burned brighter. She wanted to scream at it, tell us she was human, not some host body to wear, but her mouth was full of light. And then she saw it, visions crashing through her like lightning strikes. Alien archives. 1 billion years of memory compressed into one heartbeat. Oceans boiled by swarm hives feeding. Stars gutted. Civilizations torn open like fruit. And buried in all that horror, a secret. A pattern. The hive wasn't a mind. It was a chain. Lyra choked on a sob as realization cut through her. The swarm, the titans, even the Elder Hive, none of them acted alone. They were links bound to a deeper signal, a route hidden beyond the edge of mapped space. Whoever controlled that route controlled them all. The shard was one fragment of that network, broken loose. That's why it was afraid. It had been cast out. The merging deepened. Her hands glowed translucent, her bones a lattice of shifting light. She could feel the swarm twitch with her pulse. They were inside her blood now, their wings beating in rhythm with her heart. She lifted one trembling hand, and outside, 100 alien rifles wrenched themselves out of their wielders' claws and spun into the air. Her eyes widened. She hadn't even meant to. She tried again, deliberate this time. Clenched her fist, and the rifles crumpled in unison, metal folding like wax. The shard hissed approval. Yes, you learn. But every second of power cost her something. Her reflection in the fractured glass at her side no longer looked human. Her pupils were gone, swallowed by glowing white. Her lips bled silver instead of red. Her skin pulsed faintly with veins of light crawling like roots beneath it. She staggered toward the window, forcing herself not to fall apart, and the swarm moved with her, millions of wings beating in time with her stride. For a heartbeat, she almost forgot her fear. She was something more than human, something vast, something terrible. She raised her arms, and the swarm aligned above her like an army saluting a queen. Then the elder hive laughed. Not sound, not language, just raw contempt flooding the air. You think yourself thrown. You are nothing but broken tool. We made your shard. We cast it aside. We'll cast you aside. And then the elder hive struck. The sky went black with a wave of shadow-limbed titans, pouring from the void like living mountains. The first crashed into the swarm, its claws slicing through hundreds of wings, bodies falling like rain. Lyra staggered as the pain hit her, each death like a knife in her ribs. She tried to hold them together, tried to scream commands into their wings, but the elder hive's was stronger, older, infinite. The tether inside her chest burned white-hot, threatening to snap. She had one choice: let go, or go deeper. Her voice was barely human anymore when she whispered, "Then take me deeper." The shard erupted, not as light this time, but as structure. Alien circuitry spread across her body like living armor, wrapping her arms, curling up her throat, spearing across her spine. She screamed, body convulsing as it wove into her flesh, into her nerves, into her very thoughts. She wasn't just wearing the shard. She was becoming it. The stone floor cracked beneath her feet. Outside, the swarm that had faltered snapped back into formation, their cries echoing hers, millions of throats screaming one terrible sound. The elder hive titans froze mid-swipe, startled just for an instant. Lyra's glowing eyes met their burning void moss, and she commanded. The swarm launched, claws and wings and fire, a tidal wave of rebellion slamming into ancient flesh. For the first time in a million years, the elder hive had been answered with something other than silence. But as Lyra fell to her knees, her body a trembling cage of light and pain, she knew the truth. She hadn't just touched the hive. She had opened herself to it, and something had looked back. The citadel cracked like glass as the elder hive descended in full. Shadows poured across the sky, not ships, not bodies, but colossal limbs of living void, blotting out constellations one by one. The swarm she had bent screamed in a million voices at once, surging forward like a tide, but against the titans of the elder hive, they were nothing but sparks in a hurricane. Wings shredded, carapaces burst, their bodies rained down in sheets of fire, smearing the mountains red. Lyra's knees hit the stone, her teeth clenched so hard she tasted iron. No, not iron. Silver. Her blood. The shard was screaming too, but not in fear. In ecstasy. More. It urged, its voice like molten glass in her skull. Deeper. Merge. Break the cage. Become me. Her chest burned as if her ribs had been split open from within. Every death in the swarm carved into her, every severed wing or broken thorax hitting her like bone fractures. She was unraveling, and yet, somewhere inside the agony, she felt the hive's rhythm, their pulse, their command structure, and she realized the elder hive wasn't omnipotent. It was hierarchical, a chain of control, and she was tangled in it. The sky split with lightning that wasn't weather, but pure gravitational rupture. A titan's limbs speared down, shattering the citadel's spire beside her. The shockwave threw Lyra back, blood spraying from her mouth, her bones shattering and knitting in the same heartbeat under the shard's furious repair. Darren's broken calm crackled again, faint through the storm. "Lyra, hold on. We're coming." But his voice dissolved into static as the Elder Hive's signals swept over everything like a tide of poison. She forced herself up, every step an act of rebellion against her own breaking body. She raised one trembling hand, and the swarm obeyed. What remained of them, twisting around the Titans in a cyclone of wings and fire. But the Titans only laughed, voices booming in her skull until she wanted to claw her ears out. "You bleed. You fracture. You will kneel. All before have knelt." Her mind flashed, her father's words, her childhood workshop, the glove in the ash. And then darker, visions not her own. 1,000 species, each one breaking as she was breaking, each one bent into obedience before they were devoured. The shards seared her chest. This is how it ends. You fight, you lose, you kneel. Unless you become more than you. Her body convulsed. Silver light poured from her mouth as she screamed. The shard exploded outward, latticework circuitry crawling like veins across her entire skin. Her human outline fractured, light bleeding from her skull, her spine, her fingertips. Her swarm shrieked with her, their cries blending until the air itself vibrated. The Titans faltered for an instant. An instant. Lyra seized it. She reached into the tether with everything she had, gripping the swarm not as soldiers, but as extensions of herself. She felt their wings beat as if they were her own lungs, their claws flex as if they were her fingers. She was them. She was millions, and together they struck. A Titan's arm tore free under the storm of claws. Another reeled backward, its eye punctured by 100 burning wings. For the first time, the Elder Hive bled, black ichor spilling into the void. The sound it made wasn't laughter now. It was rage. Pure, endless rage. The shard inside Lyra laughed, drunk on the chaos. Yes, yes. Burn them, break them. You are weapon. You are war. But in the reflection of the shattered glass around her, Lyra saw what she had become. A figure of living light, veins of alien circuitry snaking over her skull, her eyes twin furnaces with no trace of human iris. She saw her hands, no longer hands, but claws of silver and fire. She tried to speak her name aloud, remind herself she was Lyra, but the sound that left her throat wasn't human. It was a hive cry. The Titans surged again, dozens this time, blotting the sky with their endless limbs. Her swarm crashed against them, millions dying in seconds, and every one stabbed into her nerves like knives. She staggered, screaming, clutching her chest. The shard whispered, almost tender this time, "You can't hold this alone. Let me take the weight. Surrender. Merge fully. End the pain." For one terrible heartbeat, she wanted to. Lyra staggered on the fractured stone, her swarm bleeding out into the void one body at a time. Each death was a blade in her chest. The Titans pressed closer, their shadows drenching the sky, their voices a chorus that rattled her bones. Kneel. Become Link. Become nothing. The shard in her sternum pulsed with frantic hunger. Its voice sharpened into a scream. Merge. Merge now. Let me bear it. Let me be you. Her hands clawed at her chest, as if she could rip it free, silver blood dripping down her arms. She wanted to scream no, to hold onto her humanity, to cling to her father's memory, to Darren's voice, to the ash and the glove that had made her who she was. But her reflection in the shattered glass showed the truth. The human face was gone. Only fire. Only circuitry. A queen of nothing but ruin. The Elder Hive struck. One Titan's claw speared through the citadel, the shockwave tearing apart towers and flinging debris into orbit. 1,000 wings burst in a single instant, their deaths ripping through Lyra like lightning. She collapsed, twitching, her body barely hers anymore. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The tether was tearing apart, unraveling her like thread. And then, Darren's voice, raw and desperate, cut through the static. Lyra, don't let it win. You are you. Even if you're the last one left, you are still you. The words shattered something inside her. She remembered his hand on hers in the bunker, steady even as fire rained. She remembered his laugh in the stolen quiet between battles. She remembered what it felt like to be touched, not as a weapon, not as a tool, but as a woman. The shard's voice twisted, panicked now. Don't listen. Don't cling. You'll break. You'll die. But Lyra's laugh bubbled out through blood and light, defiant even as her body trembled. Then I'll die human, she whispered. She forced her hands open wide and screamed, not in surrender but in rebellion, hurling every ounce of her will into the swarm. They lit up in fire, every wing blazing, every claw sharpening, as though her final defiance had ignited them all. Together they hurled themselves at the Titans, tearing, biting, exploding in flashes of burning sacrifice. The void itself seemed to burn. The elder hive shrieked, reeling, its chain of control straining under the impossible force of one fractured human's will. The shard writhed inside her, splitting her chest with fire, trying to override her. But she held on. She screamed her name aloud, tearing it out of her throat, ripping it against the alien noise. I am Lyra. And the universe heard. The Titans faltered. The elder hive's shadows rippled. For the first time, the chain bent. For the first time, the elder hive hesitated. But the cost was immediate. Lyra's body convulsed, her human form disintegrating under the strain. Flesh peeled into light. Her hands cracked into claws. Her hair burned into silver fire. Darren's horrified cry echoed in her calm. She had won them a breath of survival. But she was no longer what she had been. As the Titans reeled, she collapsed onto the cracked stone, her body glowing with alien circuitry, her heartbeat a broken drum. She lifted her head with the last of her strength. The swarm still circled her, wings folded, waiting, loyal. But their loyalty was no longer to Lyra the human. It was to Lyra the hive. Above, the elder hive's massive shadow rippled, withdrawing, not defeated but calculating. Its voice slithered through the void, colder than death. You delay. You burn. But you are mine still. Soon. The stars flickered back into view as the elder hive pulled away, leaving ruin in its wake. Darren's voice was still screaming her name, begging her to answer. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Only a pulse of alien light burst from her lips. Her eyes, glowing white-hot, turned toward the horizon. She wasn't just Lyra anymore. She wasn't just human. She wasn't just weapon. She was something else, something the hive itself had not foreseen. And as she collapsed into unconsciousness, the swarm folding around her like wings, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath.